Welcome to Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips, where we talk all things addictions, codependency, relationships, and the good, bad, and ugly in between. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Phillips. I'm super grateful you're here. I'm a master's level clinician and a relationship and attachment trauma coach. I help freedom-seeking women regain their confidence, master their triggers, and communicate their needs so they can finally put an end to toxic relationships, low self-worth, feeling like an imposter, and become more authentic, trusting, and secure. I know exactly what it feels like to be spinning in circles, stuck in obsession, and living life with all or nothing thinking. After years of failed relationships, impulsive decisions, yo-yo dieting, and riding emotional roller coasters, I knew I needed to get to the root of my issues and that I couldn't go on like this any longer. And that's exactly why I created the 10-week Secure Self-Coaching Program. I was tired of wasting time and money on professionals that didn't understand me. And I knew that trying to fix my own problems with the same thinking that got me there wasn't going to help me get any closer to my goals. If this sounds like you, feel free to send me a message and we'll set up a free consultation call to see if my program is right for you. You can find the link to my website in the show notes. Now back to the show. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips. Today, we're going to be talking about how sobriety became my superpower. And it feels really strange for me to say this because 17 plus years ago, if you would have said that I would be sitting here today talking about how getting sober would be my superpower, I probably would have laughed in your face. But it's been something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and I think it's something that I've started to take for granted. A lot of time has passed. It's become my new norm. But oftentimes I don't pause to think about the fact that I put down the drink and the drug is what gave me the life that I have today. And, only through sometimes either seeing other people struggle or unfortunately seeing other people relapse, it kind of like shocks me back into a state of like, oh my God, like that is not your reality anymore. But, looking back in hindsight, when I think about my sobriety, I was 21 years old when I first got sober, and it was something that I hid so much from people. I would go to my recovery meetings and that was fine because everybody there was there for the same reasons. But when I would go to work or I'd meet like normies, there's no way that I would feel comfortable sharing that I was sober because I felt like the odd man out. I felt like there was something inherently really wrong with me. I was the broken one. I was the one who couldn't control herself around drugs and alcohol. And I just really didn't talk about it. So for me to sit here today and think about this idea of it being my greatest gift and now a gift that I can publicly share with other people is really something I think I need to be a little bit more grateful for and talk about more, because the more and more that I come on here and the more I work with people and the more I post on social media, I get a front row ticket to people who are suffering in silence. And I don't know about you guys, but social media is terrible for that. It puts us into the state of comparison, right? Like I can look at other people's lives and I'm like, wow, they're doing great. And I see all this stuff. And then I get this private message and it's this different story behind the scene. So I think it is so important for people who, are in recovery from whatever substance, right? Could be food, drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, you name it. But to start to speak about it publicly to help the people who still feel so much shame about it, like I did. So this idea of like my superpower, what does that mean? And the idea of sobriety, and this is through a lot of trial and error and experimentation, but I am not the type of person that gets to have both things at the same time. There's kind of like the moderate drinkers, the harder drinkers, and then there's the people that kind of cross that invisible line and they go too hard, right? There's that kind of tale as old as time debate of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is alcoholism inherent? Are people born with it? Is it a family disease? Is it passed down? It actually doesn't matter. It's for you to decide. And all I needed to know was that I couldn't safely continue to drink and use and build a life at the same time. I had to pick a lane. But at the beginning, it's so, so, so difficult. I used to talk often about how good habits in the beginning They feel terrible before you do them, and then they feel great after. But the tricky thing about bad habits is that they feel really good in the moment, and then those feel really bad after. But if you're anything like me or anybody across the board, when you're struggling with depression, anxiety, low self worth, loneliness, isolation, you want to feel better in the moment. For a long time, I would see people relapse in recovery rooms, and I was like almost taken aback, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they relapsed after a period of sobriety. And now it's like, no, I totally get it. I totally get it, because when you're dead sober, you feel everything. And while that can be a blessing, when you've kind of started to work through your stuff, for a long time, it was not a blessing. Not for me, anyways. I was walking around life, it was like I was missing this like emotional insulation, and everything just felt so intense. Friendships with people, getting jobs, the fear alone that I would wake up with in the morning when nothing was even going wrong. It was like this sense of impending doom came over me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm terrified to start the day. And that's really hard to get through sober. But it's like that idea, or these kind of like sayings that you hear. It's like, don't quit before the miracle happens. Like, just stretch it out till you kind of like get over the hump and get to the other side. That can be really difficult. It can be really difficult because the pain is so intense at the very beginning. And, when people talk to me about goals, right? Weight loss goals, saving money goals, it's all the same stuff underneath, right? It's this ability to think, do you want the immediate pleasure? Or do we want to delay the gratification for a little bit of longer term happiness, which comes inherently from the discipline? And the latter is really difficult to choose, especially if you're anything like me. I am like an addict through and through. I'm like, yeah, I want the bikini body, but I also want the hot tray of brownies right now. So it's like, it's really difficult. And it's the same with sobriety. It's like, yes, of course, people, especially people who know that they have a problem with drugs or alcohol, of course they want to stop using, they want a better life. But in order to get that, it's like, how many no's do you have to say before you can start saying yes to these other things? And, going back to this idea of like, not taking the 17 years for granted, but, I speak with a lot of people and they see the version of myself now, but my God, did I struggle. Like the first 8 years of my recovery, it was almost like I was 21, but emotionally I was 13. It's like I had to start all over again. I had to learn everything all over again. I had to learn how to be honest. I had to learn how to show up to work. That's really difficult, especially when all you're used to is bartending, and my shift would start at like 5 p.m. and now I'm working at Starbucks, and she's like, "Can you be here at 5:30 a.m.?" and I'm like, I think so. I'll try. You know what I mean? I'll try, but there's also this gift that comes with desperation, right? And the majority of people that will come to work with me or that I've journeyed with in sobriety, we all tend to get to this fork in the road moment. And a lot of the times, change is only built at that fork in the road. Because if you're anything like me, I have to be cornered, I have to be desperate, and I have to be out of all of my other solutions. Otherwise, I'm going to keep trying those. I'm going to try every last one until they really don't work anymore. But at the age of 21, out of my second rehab, couldn't borrow or steal any more money off of anybody else. It was this fork in the road. And was I thinking to myself, oh yeah, I'm going to stay sober for the next 17 years? Absolutely not. But I was like, at least for a period of time, you need to pick a lane right now. And it's just so interesting, right? Like hindsight is always 2020. It's always so much clearer. But looking at the building blocks of sobriety, it's just all of the little jobs that I had, all of the awkward moments or the first, like I remember I went to like a recovery dance. It was like a Halloween dance. I can still feel inside how uncomfortable I was. Like people were dancing and they were like letting loose and having fun. And I was just like stiff, bored. I don't know how to have fun without a lot of cocaine and a lot of Jack Daniels. But we build it up, right? Like the very cool thing about sobriety too, or these really longer term goals, is that there is no graduation date. Because if you give me a graduation date and a certificate, I'm out. I'm like, I did it. I get the ego hit. Thank you so much. What's next? But this idea of sobriety, this like ongoing journey that I can keep changing and growing, there's no finish line. And it really forces me to make a decision. And I've changed a lot over the 17 years, and my views on recovery have changed a lot over the 17 years. Before, it was, I knew one way. I knew an abstinence based model of sobriety, which worked for me and continues to work for me. But that is not available for everybody. It's not going to be everybody's experience. So it's so important, just like any other goal, is to really think about what's going to be your superpower. Like, what type of lifestyle brings out the best version of yourself? I didn't used to like that saying, like, the highest version of ourselves, our best selves, but there actually is a best Jess, because the Jess who's drinking and using, maybe I'm fun for that evening and I can make people laugh and we get all crazy. But the next day, and this is so important for me to talk about because I so quickly forget how I felt when my eyes would open at like 2 p.m. after a night of debauchery, just a mess. And I really forget, like, I take for granted opening my eyes at 5:30 a.m. in a clean bed with clean sheets and a clean condo. That was not my life. I don't get to do drugs and drink alcohol and get that at the same time. But it has been my biggest blessing because it's forced me to make a decision. And what I have come to know about myself and about others who tend to fluctuate emotionally is that it's actually more difficult for people like us to make long-term decisions because how I feel changes so often on a daily basis. And previously, like, I would say my first 5 to 10 years of recovery, I was extremely emotional because all of these emotions were so new. I had to feel them. I couldn't medicate myself. I couldn't black out. I mean, I would do like smoke cigarettes or binge eat or whatever, but it was such a short period of time. There's a lot of time left in the day. That was another revelation. It's like, wow, there's like a whole 24 hours when you're sober. I don't know where that time went when I was blasted, but like I could sit on the bathroom floor and play cards with you for probably 36 hours straight when I was high. And then you get sober and it's like there's a whole world out here. There's this new reality, and it almost forces somebody to get hobbies or to pursue interests because I don't know, any recovering person I know with a more kind of addictive brain or that struggles with their mental health, they don't do very well just sitting on the couch with their own thoughts. That will come a little later when we've kind of developed a little bit more sense of like internal peace. But at the beginning, my God, we used to all joke, like we would be standing outside of recovery meetings, king cans of Red Bull, smoking cigarettes, like, where are we going? Let's go bowling, let's go do something. But it was fun and it was what I needed at the time. So this idea of like, okay, here I am, I'm sober, but at the beginning, I felt like I was losing. I felt like I was losing for a long time in recovery. I was 21. All of my old drinking friends continued to party because they partied a little bit more normally. Like they would still get up and go to work the next day. I didn't have that luxury. It could be a job that I'm really excited about. It could have been anything the next morning, and I would go out that night, call it self sabotage, call it whatever you want. I was not going to be at the event, even if I gave you like my 100% guarantee. So, this idea of kind of like losing this old version of yourself, which was the only girl that I knew, now here I am, kind of like frozen deer in headlights, dead sober. And I'm like, my God, what do I do now? But the cool thing too is that, when you're forced to make changes, and I mean, I say forced, nobody was forcing me, but I'm not the type of person that can just kind of chill out. So I was essentially forced to start like, okay, looking at my life. I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have a high school diploma. I lived at my parents' house. I had zero money. And I was like, okay, what are you gonna do now? And One of the very cool things about sobriety from everybody that I've met, like the creative minds that I have seen get sober, and I totally understand why they drink and use the way that they do because it's so soothing, especially for an overactive brain. But when these people get sober, they're unstoppable. It's amazing. It's like, oh my God, did we have this talent the whole time? I remember my first job at Starbucks. She asked me to be manager like a few short weeks later and gave me the key to the safe. And I was like, you sure you want to do this? Because there's always this old tape in the back of my mind saying, you don't know who I am. If you really knew who I was, you wouldn't trust me. You wouldn't give me this. You wouldn't give me the chance. And we have to be so careful of that in recovery too, because I can tell you 17 years later, that little voice can still creep in if I want it to. It's there to tell me, no, who are you to do any of this stuff? And I just need to act my way through it. So these kind of building blocks, and there's this one memory that I will always hold so near and dear to my heart is when I was going to do my driving test and my dad took me. And I had been practicing and I did the driving school or whatever. And I remember I had to do like parallel park or something. And the driving instructor was sitting next to me and she was like, okay, you passed. And I got out of the car and I was like holding the paper and my dad was over there standing outside of the car and just like the smile on my face, the smile on his face. And it was like these first moments were happening now as an adult, like these things that people experienced at a younger age. And mind you, I was only 22 probably at the time. So it wasn't that much older, but these significant moments, again, they became so special to me because if I am not sober, I don't get to have those moments. I don't get to have the smiles. My parents were concerned about, my mother got so physically ill, close to the point of needing to be hospitalized because of how worried sick she was about me all the time. I don't do that to people anymore. I don't need to do that. Even though my mother still calls like 8 times a day. She's like, honey, I haven't heard from you today. I'm like, mom, 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 I'm almost 40 and I've been sober a very long time. I'm not like dead in a ditch somewhere. So it's just like looking back. But again, for anybody listening to this who is maybe newly sober, toying with the idea of sober, trying to cut down your consumption, practicing harm reduction, whatever you need to do to get to this goal of whatever your insides are telling you. Like, it's one of the biggest things that I work with my clients is I don't have the answers for you, but I'm going to guide you back to be able to listen to your own voice. And if somewhere, somehow you have this small inherent voice that's telling you, you need to put the drink or drug down, listen to that. Listen to that. And it's not going to be easy at first. And it's not going to feel like a superpower at first. I watch people coming in now and they're just sitting there just sobbing and like, this is miserable. And we have to have this blind faith. And I always tell myself this, and this is actually how I quit smoking cigarettes. I told myself, wait a minute. Everybody, mostly everybody, except for my mother, mostly everybody that I know that smokes wants to quit. So when I quit smoking, I thought to myself, if you start again, you're just going to have to quit again. And I really didn't want to have to quit again. Quitting is very hard, right? And once I had put the cigarettes down, it was like, again, pick a lane. Because this idea of like coming in and out, starting, stopping, texting the ex, opening the door, closing the door, drinking, closing the door. To me, it's a lot more painful and a lot more confusing than just making that decision. But we used to have this, well, we do have this saying in recovery where it's like stopping isn't necessarily the hard part, it's staying stopped. That's the hard part. Because one of the biggest catch-22s in sobriety is the ego starts to grow back. Like the Starbucks stories and the getting my license story, going back to university, these were all like the baby beginning steps to building the life that I have now. And I still felt quite fragile. I still needed a lot of support at the time. I still felt like people were very worried about me. There was a lot of like family therapy still going on. There was a nice cushion around me. So I still felt like Bambi, like I was just still getting my legs. But then what happens to speak for myself, an ego like mine, is that when it does grow back, and I remember happening around 10 years sober, I was like, look at me and look at all the work I've done and look at the life I've built. And I remember when I moved to Toronto, one of my very first thoughts when I moved to Toronto was, I could probably start drinking here. That was one of the first thoughts after 10 years of sobriety. And I remember I used to hear people drinking after long periods of sobriety, and I would be like, what? It wouldn't make sense to me. Like, how could you do that? And then as I journeyed, I started to realize like that is such an easy thought to have. And it's actually the easy answer to my problem in that moment, right? Is like, for sure, you feel uncomfortable, take a drink. Feel uncomfortable, take a pill, do whatever. And yeah, it's going to go away for the moment. Texting the ex, you're going to feel better for the moment. But what happens after? And one of the biggest tools that I practice today is playing that tape forward. So it's like, okay, Jess, you want the tray of brownies now? Fine. I know how that's going to feel. It's going to feel very soothing. I'm going to feel comforted. I'm going to get the dopamine hit. That's all great. But instead, I'm like, why don't you picture yourself tomorrow morning getting ready to go to the gym? How do you feel then? Because my impulsive, addictive mind doesn't want to play that game. It doesn't want to propel me 24 hours ahead of time. It wants to fix the problem now. And another beautiful thing about sobriety, and sobriety being the superpower, is that I get to pause now and say, what's the problem? What's the problem? Instead of me telling you what's going to fix it or thinking of something that I can numb it with, I get to, and this is really, I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is. It's a very difficult process, but to say like, wow, I'm in a lot of personal pain right now. What's going on? Who can I call? Can I ask for support? Can I be honest? And, you know, I love it right now because I feel like there's a movement out there too of a lot more people adopting this idea of sobriety, just I don't know. I don't know if it's been around for a while, but I feel like I go to parties now with normies and I'm expecting them all to be hammered. And they're like, oh, no, I don't drink. And they made some like cool mocktail. And I'm like, wow. And we can have these kind of like honest conversations and just be myself. My entire life, I was trying to avoid being Jess. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not skinny enough. You're not going to get what you want. You're going to lose what you have. Hold on tight, numb out, do whatever. And this entire time, all I had to do was just be myself, allow myself permission to be myself. Because this idea of perfection that so many people are striving for, it's not attractive and it doesn't exist. And, the closest people in my life, I love them, for their imperfect self. And when we go out now, I love to have these conversations. Like I went to a wedding recently with another sober friend and we were tearing up the dance floor till 2:00 in the morning. Like nobody would be able to tell that we were sober. We probably looked like the drunkest ones there. And it's like, we did not need a drop of alcohol to have fun. And it's an amazing realization, because I don't know when this switch necessarily happened from this being the worst thing that ever happened to me and such a big part of my identity. And like, oh, Jess, she was the troubled one. She's the one that went to rehab, blah, blah, blah. But this gift of sobriety, it ingrained the idea of helping others, serving others in whatever capacity that looks like for you, because the underlying message is just your problems aren't that big. The inner critic and the ego that's going on inside of your head, that chatter, get out of yourself and help somebody else. And it's like a miracle drug. It actually stops the chatter like while it's happening. I'll get a phone call, let's say I'm having a bad day or I'm worried about something that's not even going to happen. And then the phone rings and I'm like, I really don't want to answer the phone. And that's another thing. Recovery and being sober has taught me, do the opposite of like your first thought. And at first I thought that was kind of rude. And I was like, I don't know about that, but it's true. Don't want to get off the couch and go to a meeting? Go to a meeting. don't want to go for a walk or go to the gym, move my body, go do that. It's like this ego of mine is trying to say very safe and comfortable. Somebody's calling, don't answer the phone, stay and isolate. And it's like, no. And I answer the phone, share the problem, talk about it, listen to somebody else's problem. And then an hour later, I don't even really remember what I was obsessing about. So, that alone, the aspect of community too, I think that's one of the biggest superpowers actually, is the size of the community that I have gotten to build and help other people build because of my sobriety. And it's not necessarily a community based on sobriety, but the premise is there because it's taught me we are better in numbers. We are living in a society today where people are home alone on their phones, on TikTok. They're feeling lonelier than ever, comparing themselves more than ever, and people's mental health is just declining, right? So this idea of like, okay, yeah, it started off, hey, I'm sober, you're sober, let's go to a recovery meeting. Great. But then it turns into like, oh, what sports am I interested in? What hobbies am I interested in? Just like bonding with people over things like, regaining old relationships back in your life, like going out doing stuff with my mom, things like that. Like that was not available to me when I was using and hiding in a very dark apartment. My world revolved around myself, my needs, how depressed I was, and where I was going to score next or where the next party was. So this idea of like, man, putting the drink or the drug down, I thought it was going to close a million doors. It opened so many doors. It's just, it's that, it's building that discipline and that skill, or at least trusting someone else that the pain that you're feeling right now, because I don't know about anybody else, but like, I want to blow up my life for 10 years and then I want to feel better in 1 week after being sober. I'm like, let's just forget about like everything that we did. I want to feel better right now. But that's not what happened in my sobriety. I really messed things up when I was drinking and using, and that took a little while to clean up, and that's okay. It didn't take as long as I thought it was going to, but there is going to be a process where I'm not just going to snap my fingers and everything is going to be completely rosy again. So this idea of like, okay. And I also knew, just like the smoking, everybody can't be lying, because I saw these sober people, and one of the first things that I saw was people laughing. And I mean like being idiots, belly laughing together. And that happened for me when I was a kid. But when I started to drink and use, yeah, okay, it was there at the beginning, but that's one of the things that goes away. With isolated drinking and using, the party gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I don't know when it happened, but I stopped laughing and having fun along the way. So when I saw people doing that in sobriety, I was like, okay, they can't all be lying. They can't all be lying. These people are enjoying their lives. And this idea of like, okay, go try something. I remember when I had to put my tail between my legs and go back to this like adult ed center and complete my high school diploma. I was so nervous. I was so embarrassed. I was like, I can't believe I'm here. And then I started to do the tests and the classes and the exams, and I was like, shit, this is kind of easy. I should have done this while I was actually in high school. I don't know what the hell I was doing, like magic mushrooms in high school. I had zero interest in doing any of the homework. And so I started to do these things, and this sense of confidence comes in, and you're like, wow, I did that. I said I was going to do that, and I did that. Mini superpower. And then it's like on to the next. And then I got into university, and I was like, what are you going to do now, genius? I don't know how to read at a university level. Okay, fine. I failed my first class. Then I got a D. Then I got a C. And I was like, and then somebody said to me, they're like, C's get degrees. I'm like, yeah, C's get degrees. Let's go. I don't need to be perfect. And then all of a sudden started meeting all these students, these normie students, build community there, right? Again, I don't get to party like I was and get that life at the same time. I had to make that decision. And making a decision, it also gives you peace of mind. I don't constantly have to be like, oh, I'm going to go do this and then I'm going to this. Fine. Were there some lonelier nights? Were there some more boring nights and days at the beginning? Of course. If you're used to doing 3.5 grams of cocaine a day, when you get sober, it's going to feel a little bit lame for a while. But then you start to build that up, you know? And right now I'm talking about all the amazing material things. That's just a given. When people get sober, they're they have these qualities, they have these amazing abilities to, you know, get these jobs. They can grow in the corporate ladder very quickly. Like, we're very enthusiastic people, but the biggest piece of all of this is the emotional piece. And it's really learning how to master that for yourself, right? Because I couldn't be the same old Jess that I was when I was partying. I couldn't bring that into my sober life. There's no way that would have lasted. The erratic behavior, the moods up and down all the time. And that's how I started living my sobriety. I started to do things based on how I felt that day. And if that's one thing I don't do anymore, and that's where this idea of this kind of structure piece comes in, it's like, no, you're going to do this regardless of how you feel. And I don't mean like, really force yourself or push yourself when you really don't want to do something, but this idea of structure, like even in rehab, it was like, make your bed first thing in the morning. In 17 years, I haven't not made that bed. I would feel weird if I left the house without making the bed, because in my mind, it just awards me this sense of structure, this like, okay, what's next? Okay, this kind of like clarity of mind, this purity of mind. And now you can go on to the next thing. And you really become unstoppable. Your energy comes back. People start to trust you again. I never realized how much, like, my mother would hide her purse and her wallet when I was around. People were always gossiping. They always had something to say. I was always in some jackpot. And now it's like people trust you when you're sober. It's this amazing thing where it's like, I don't have to think about like where I was or who I owe money to or what did I say when I was intoxicated. And there's such a freedom in that because there's more space in your mind to just go about your day. So for anybody listening who, especially in the beginning days of sobriety, or even who have been sober for a while, because that's also very normal, right? It's very normal. At first, I thought it was completely taboo. I was like, okay, I'm sober now. I can never say that I want to drink again, or I've had thoughts of drinking. And then I remember somebody saying once, like, Jess, you're an alcoholic and you had a drug problem. Of course, you're going to have thoughts of drinking and using again. It's not the thoughts that matter. It's the actions that I take. I'm allowed to have the thoughts. But when I keep my actions in line with where I want to go, that's what increases the superpower. Because I'm like, okay, you got through it. You felt really shitty yesterday. Maybe you felt left out. Maybe you saw a bunch of old friends on Facebook at some amazing party and they were all half in the bag. And I'm like, oh man, I'm home alone, blah, blah, blah. The next morning, the feeling always passes. The next morning I wake up and I open my eyes at like 6 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. I did not give in to how I felt because those thoughts are so fleeting. The long-term happiness that comes from addiction, from discipline, is what we're really looking for. But it's just hard to fight a mind that's constantly telling you, give in to the impulse, give in to the impulse, give in to the impulse. So it's like, okay, how long? And that's why things like these challenges exist, right? I hear a lot of a very common one that I hear with people who are eventually going to tell me they have a drinking problem or a drug problem. They're like, someone said to me the other day, they're like, I've been doing dry February. And I was like, that's great. How's that going? And he's like, well, I picked dry February because it was the shortest month of the year. And I was like, and that's how I know. That's how I know, right? We start to play these games with ourselves, but it's okay. Whatever you have to do to get you closer to your goal, right? If that looks like harm reduction, I watched my mom try to quit smoking that way. She's like, I'm just going to cut down. And I was like, that's really cute. If that works for you, amazing. For me, cutting down, that's like giving me like a quarter of a brownie each day. I am rustling through that fridge 6 hours later looking for that tray. I'm just that type of person. This idea of this abstinence-based model works really well for a mind like me, again, because I don't want to flip-flop. Are we in? Are we out? And when I'm out, that's when all the superpowers come out. It really does. And I can't forget that. And I remember somebody saying to me years ago, I was young, I was in my early 20s, and I was really miserable in recovery at the beginning. And he was saying, like, one day you're going to be really grateful. You're going to be really grateful that all of this happened to you, and it's going to serve a really big purpose in your life. And I was like, okay, old man, like, whatever you say, you know? And now, even if you said, Jess, I'll give you 24 hours and you could safely drink and use for the day, and then you still get to keep your life, I wouldn't want it. You couldn't trade it now for what I have. And again, I don't know when that happened because I spent so long feeling really unhappy. Like, when is it going to be my turn? When am I going to be okay with sobriety? When am I going to flourish? And sometimes it happens really quickly for people. And if you're really stubborn like me and you don't want to do a lot of the inner work at the beginning, it's going to take a little bit longer. But when it did happen, now it's like, oh, I like this sober life. I like being able to go to weddings and not have to get hammered to be on the dance floor. I like waking up the next morning and be like, oh man, I still have money in my pocket. That's amazing. I didn't have any money when I was using. There's no bank account. There was no nothing. So just, this whole topic, this whole idea has just been this amazing reminder. And if I can give you any encouragement or any advice, it's don't compare your journey to somebody else's, because I did that for so long. I was like, I'm not happy like this person. I'm not getting the material stuff. I'm not getting the relationship. I'm not getting whatever they're getting in sobriety. And it's like, your journey is going to be very unique to your own. And to be honest, all the things that I was so stubborn about and that I held on to, and the toxic relationships and all these things, have become one of the greatest gifts that I can share with other people now. And they feel seen and they feel heard and they don't feel judged. Because I thought you could just mess up your life drinking and using, but it's like, no, you can really still make a mess when you're sober as well, if you have a mind like mine. And it was like, once I started to get my head on straight in that department, it was like, oh my God, all these things that I used to feel so ashamed about, I can help somebody else now. And again, just another area of community built so that everybody doesn't have to feel so alone going through this. So I hope my rant on sobriety was very helpful, and please tune in next week to another fun, juicy episode. Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone for listening and supporting Living Out Loud. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.